Hello there, you lovely people. I hope that you're safe. I hope that you're well. And I'm delighted that today I am joined by one of the incredible ambassadors out there for mental health. Her name, if you didn't know it already, is Hope Virgo. So hi there, Hope.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on.
You are more than welcome. So I've got a few questions for you. I've kind of tried to limit it down because I could just talk to you forever, I know. But my first question for you is, how would you best describe what an eating disorder is?
So an eating disorder is a mental illness, but it's one of those mental illnesses that also presents often in a physical way as well. So quite often it falls between the gap between kind of mental and physical illnesses when we're looking at things like diagnosis and services and treatment. It is a coping mechanism to life. They are very rarely about food, body image, and weight, but they're complicated mental illnesses. And what I always kind of think of it as, particularly for me as well, is it was quite literally like having this best friend with me all the time, giving me this real kind of sense of value and purpose, a sense of control, and also often helps numb a lot of emotions. I do want to just emphasize quickly that eating disorders come in all shapes and sizes. You can't tell by looking at someone whether they have an eating disorder. And statistically, only 6% of people who have an eating disorder will ever fall into that underweight category. So it's really important, I guess, to just remember that actually we can't always tell if someone's struggling. And probably that stereotypical view of eating disorders that a lot of us maybe have, it is often not actually the case that they look like that.
No, I think that is such a good point. So, Hope, can you just let us know what you do and why you do it?
So I am an author and mental health campaigner. So kind of split my time between doing workshops with schools and corporates, and then also doing a lot of campaigning work, working with the government, trying to make sure that everyone with an eating disorder or an unhealthy relationship with food and their body can access treatment on the NHS. It's my real passion. I've done it for about 5 years. I speak a lot about kind of lived experience and come from it from kind of that angle within it. I'm not a trained therapist or a counsellor, but myself have struggled with an eating disorder since the age of 12, 13, and believe that actually if you've been through something, you can really kind of help change the kind of policy practices, and you can just change, I guess, that kind of whole face of eating disorders as well.
Most definitely. So, I kind of would like this video to touch on trying to support young people that may be struggling themselves. I'd also like us to touch upon kind of guidance for those that have friends that have an eating disorder. And ultimately, sometimes for those parents and carers that they too kind of struggling with regards to their children having an eating disorder. So if we start off first with regards to kind of supporting a young person that has an eating disorder or an unhealthy relationship with food, what would be your top two suggestions to kind of get them towards kind of going in a better direction for them to help themselves?
So I always think it's really important to identify one person at least that you can have that honest conversation with. So whether that's sending them an email telling them what's going on, whether that's sending a quick text saying, I feel this, I've been feeling this for this amount of time, I think I'm struggling with this, and starting to have that kind of conversation around it. The second thing to do, and something that really, really helped me in my recovery, but I think kind of more broadly, is about reminding yourself of all of those reasons why actually you don't want to be living with an eating disorder. The eating disorder is a symptom that something else isn't going right, and maybe you're struggling with other kinds of emotions and feelings. So trying to work out actually what that fear is, what that looks like, and what feelings you might be projecting onto your body.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then I know, obviously, working as a counsellor with some young people that have the diagnosis but just aren't in a place where they're ready to receive the support. So what would be your guidance for those young people that just aren't ready or don't feel that they're kind of in a position to accept that they have an eating disorder?
Yeah, and it's so hard. And I think so often when I think about like eating disorders, I make it sound so easy to get to that space where things are fine. But all of us need to actually accept the eating disorder for ourselves. I would probably suggest looking at what exercises you can do to help you understand that the way that you're thinking about food and your body isn't accurate. Something that I did when I was in treatment was they got me to draw how I imagined myself, and then they traced around my body. And for me, that was the concrete evidence that I needed to actually see that something was kind of really, really wrong in the way that I viewed my body. And that was like my starting ground to actually get to that better space. And I think as well, like just surrounding yourself with the right people, surrounding yourself with those people that bring you joy, that kind of cheer you on, that can help you create those happy memories, because that again will help us to kind of shift kind of away from like our brains and focusing on kind of the eating disorder, but realize there's a lot more in life to actually be focusing on and doing.
And then when it comes to those young people that have friends that are just struggling either with an eating disorder or kind of just unhealthy kind of relationship with food, as a friend, and we know how important friends are, they are so important, but it must be really hard for somebody that has a friend who is struggling with kind of an eating disorder and unhealthy relationship with food. So what would be your guidance for them?
Yeah, it is hard again. And I think the problem is so often is that when we're worried about someone, we go in and we try and fix that person. But people with eating disorders don't want to be fixed. We don't want to have sympathy. We quite literally just want someone kind of walking alongside us, someone to listen when we want to offload, someone that we will listen when we want to vent about things. Within that, I think creating happy memories is key. Making sure that actually you're not always planning activities in restaurants and over meal times, but you're maybe offering kind of like multiple like activities for that person to get involved in and come along to. And I think as well, just being really mindful of the conversations that you're also having. One of my pet hates and biggest frustrations in life is that we live in a society where we normalize diet chat and normalize disordered eating. So just being really mindful of those conversations is really, really important if you've got friends that might be struggling.
And then my final point with trying to offer guidance is obviously for parents and carers. I can't begin to imagine kind of their position about where they must be or how they must be feeling. But what guidance would you offer them?
Yeah, and again, it's really, really hard. I think for parents and carers, I think particularly depending on what your kind of family makeup is and who you've got in that role where you're kind of caring for someone. But I think again, it's not about fixing that person. It's about giving them that space to feel really, really heard. It's important to neutralize meal times. I think so often meal times can be like fueled with so much emotion. And I think particularly given the year that we've had with the pandemic and things like that, like often meal times, you get so preoccupied with talking about food and talking about the pandemic, talking about the fears, the worries, the anxieties. And I think sometimes actually maybe having those conversations, yes, is important, but making sure that you're having them away from the food so that individuals don't have to show that they're struggling through the eating and part of that as well. And I think as well, like making sure that you're having an open dialogue, making sure that maybe if you need it, you're having a routine in place around food, working out what that might look like, realizing that actually you probably need to have some sort of distraction in place after a meal time so that that person can kind of ease back into the evening. And I think as well, like unpacking maybe what's going on for them. Like I said, the parents and carers, their job isn't to fix someone, but actually just having that space to offload some of those fears around their body, around certain food groups, could be a really, really good starting point to help that person to actually get to that space. And then I think finally, just reminding people that you know that they're not okay, even if they're eating and physically looking kind of well again, because obviously the eating disorder is so much like about so much more than that.
Oh my gosh, Hope, you're full of so much wisdom. So I've got two more questions. If we wanted to find more about your work, because you've done so much campaigning out there, where can we find you on social media or just find out more about your work?
Yeah, so the best place is probably Instagram, which is just my name, so Hope Virgo, and I tend to kind of post a lot of the campaigning stuff out there. If people want to get involved with the Dump the Scales campaign, If you just go on change.org and type in #DumpTheScales, then that will also come up then. And yeah, I kind of share most updates on that. I think there's always a lot of MP engagement that needs to be happening. And I do think the only way that we're actually going to change a lot of this stuff is if we're really, really creating a lot of the noise out there and kind of, yeah, I guess sharing stories, like championing things. And yeah, just being really, really vocal when we can.
And what's the name of your book? Because it's a fantastic book. It's here somewhere, actually, on the bookshelf. I don't know where, but it's there somewhere.
So yeah, it's called Stand Tall Little Girl, and it basically kind of documents my journey of recovery from an eating disorder. Has little bits as well from my mum in it as well, and gives kind of like a mix of personal stuff to practical advice as well.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about it, is that, and it is literally full of kind of inspiration about taking those little steps forward, and how it is with that support, you can do it. So my final question for you, please, Hope, is what advice would you give to your 16-year-old self?
Such a good question.
I know, isn't it just? It's so hard. It's so hard. So what would it be?
I think it would probably be to realize that you're enough the way that you are. I think so much of my eating disorder was kind of wrapped up in not feeling good enough, with numbing a lot of emotion, not feeling like I could talk about things because I was afraid of what people would think. But I think if I'd felt good enough as I was and felt able to show myself that compassion, then things might have been slightly different.
I think that's really good advice. Hope, thank you so much for your time. I wish you all the best. And for those watching this, most definitely kind of watch and keep your eye open for Hope, because she's got some fantastic work that she's doing. So thank you very much, Hope.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome.